Good afternoon and welcome to the Economic Times Corporate Social Responsibility Sustainable Future panel discussion, Corporate Social Responsibility in India in the year 2016-17 and the way forward. To discuss on this topic and many others, I have with me esteemed panel. Thank you all of you for joining us. I have with me Mr. Vijay Sethi. He is the Chief Information Officer and Head CSR at Hero Motocorp. Ms. Vaishali Nigam Sinha, Director, Renew Power and the Chief Executive Officer of iCharity. I also have Mr. Abhishek Humbad. He is the co-founder of Next Generation. First, thank you all of you for being a part of this panel discussion. Now, starting off with, let me give a small glimpse as to what corporate social responsibility is all about. It isn't very old here in India, it's just a 2 years old baby. So the provision of corporate social responsibility under Section 135 of the Companies Act of 2013, which you all are aware of, the three broad categories of companies. The first being 500 crores or more, or a turnover of 1,000 crores or more, or a net profit of 5 crores or more. So your organization, I'm sure you do fall under one of these categories. So let's start with one of the projects which you would like to talk about. Let's begin with you, Mr. Sethi.
Sure, thank you. So if I look from Hero Motocorp perspective, we are a two-wheeler manufacturing organization. We are the world's largest two-wheeler manufacturing organization. So if I look at our CSR vision, it is about three things. It's about having a greener, safer and an equitable world. So which means that all our activities from a CSR perspective are under this ambit only. So we have four key areas under which our entire CSR activities are there. The first, from greener perspective, is what we do either for Swachh Bharat or for tree plantation across the country. From an equitable perspective, we look at two things. One is girl child. So we support girl child across country. And the second one is about education. So we support education not just for girl child, but for everybody. And the third is about safer, which is primarily about road safety.
All right.
So these are the key areas on which we work. Also, from my own perspective, since I also look at IT, so we give a lot of impetus in this entire thing from a digital perspective. So whether it's on social media, whether it's on websites or on other Twitters and other things. So we do a lot of stuff from a CSR perspective in all these areas. If I look at one project, so let me take one project which is very close to this group's heart. So around 6 odd months back, with Times of India, we actually ran a campaign in Delhi, which is Delhi we know is one of the most polluted cities in the world.
Right.
So we ran a campaign of planting trees. So in that 30-day campaign which we ran across over here, so we actually planted roughly around 1.4 lakh trees all over the city. So this became a huge success. The key thing, as I see from a tree plantation, perhaps that gave some bit of satisfaction, but beyond that, what we know is the survival rate of trees is actually not very high. So we, along with Times of India and along with DDA, worked on various things to ensure that at least we have 90% survival as of now. So over the last 7 months, I'm really happy that our survival rate on those trees has been very high. And post of that, then we actually went ahead and planted trees and saplings all over the country. So last 10 months, we would have been roughly around 2 odd lakh trees that we have planted.
That's a big number.
That's a big number, and the second part along with that is where we are actually putting up in government schools a lot of toilets, especially for girls' schools, because what we could see is that a lot of girls beyond an age of 9-10 years don't actually come to schools because there are not toilet facilities. So last 5-6 months, we have put in more than 120 odd toilets. Over the next couple of months, another 100 odd toilets are going live. So that's what we are focusing on.
Great. Thank you. Ms. Sinha?
Yes. So at Renew Power is a company which is just about 5 years old. We are a fairly young company, and for us, social responsibility the 2% has really got little to do with what we are doing. From I would say year one, even though we were not mandated to, or it wasn't mandatory for us to commit to social responsibility. We've always been engaged, at a project level, and now under a very organized program. Our program is called the Renew India Initiative, where our objective is to be able to run programs across the breadth of the country, to be able to have a transformational impact in the communities we operate. We believe it is critical, and so we are currently present in over 20 villages, over 80 sites across India, which is pretty vast. And we have partnered with our communities to be able to work with them, collaborate with them, with the communities, with the NGOs and the government, to come up with effective programs which benefit the communities in which we operate. So that is the essence of our program.
Any particular project?
Yes, sure. We broadly divide it in 3 broad categories. One is human capital, social and natural capital. So to the extent we can invest and develop in these areas very systematically, and we collaborate and try and feed into the government initiatives which have been announced, to the extent it makes sense for our company to be able to get involved. So just like yourself, we are also contributing to constructing toilets in areas where we are present, where our communities have the need for such toilets. Skill development is another area we are involved in. Education is a large part of what we do, and women empowerment is also something I'm personally very passionate about. And so in a very systematic way, we have programs which cover these areas. You know, and a unique program, I'd like to talk about 2. So another thing we do at Renew is, you know, there is, you know, corporate social responsibility, and there is individual social responsibility. And we are very serious about individual social responsibility, because we believe that has significant impact. It's a very powerful tool for us and our employees to get engaged with the communities and connect and become one with what we are doing, the vision of the company and the objectives of the company as well. So at a corporate level, we did a very interesting fun program. It was called the Rice Bucket Challenge, you know, from the Ice Bucket Challenge. And we had set a target of raising, you know, where employees came in and brought certain amount of rice. And just for the record, we raised, I think, 100 times what was initially targeted. So we thought we'll do probably 1,000 kilos. We had all of 100 plus employees, but we raised significant multiple. People literally got their grocery stores to deliver to the NGOs directly, huge. And there was a lot, and there was an award for people. So we like to engage our employees to participate in our social programs. At the site level, we are running a very interesting program which is related to education. You know, I believe there are lots of ratnas all over, scattered all over India. You know, when you go overseas, I myself, I've studied in the US, and, you know, Indians shine everywhere. We believe that the hunt for the, you know, intellect at the grassroots level needs to be tapped further. So we are running various programs which are innovative programs which tap on technology to be able to identify high IQ talent and then take them on and develop their skills and interests. So I hope that is a powerful way to be able to transform the future of our country.
Powerful at the same time, unique and different.
Yeah.
Thank you. Mr. Humbad?
Yeah, so I represent NextGen, and you know, we actually work with corporates on channelizing their CSR capital, and currently work with more than 150 companies and channelize about 1,000 crores of CSR capital annually, and it's across, you know, areas of intervention across districts. We work with MNCs, we work with PSUs, we work with Indian companies, and you know, the CSR law has actually made a big change in different ways. So India was always a responsible country. As an Indian corporates, you know, as they mentioned, we're already doing good for the society. What the law did was to make it more structured. Also, one very critical part is to involve the board. I think everyone focuses on the 2% number, you know, which is, you know, whether it's 10,000 crores, 20,000 crores, 25,000 crores. But I think the most critical part is, you know, how do you get the best intellectual capacity in the company to invest their time, effort, and resources on CSR? And that's the board level involvement that the law has made. And what we have seen because of this happening is a big shift in how companies look at CSR. Right. As in earlier, it was more of checkbook, charity, or donation. But what they look at it now is more of a strategical approach. And you know, the CEO wants returns in the end. The returns are not financial returns, but some returns to the company. And the approach has gone from a philanthropist approach to almost like a venture capitalist approach, that I have this pot of money. How do I create the maximum impact both for the society and the company? And this is the thought process that we are seeing. And I think the first year of the law was more about compliance, and it was more of the CFOs and the company secretaries who were getting involved. But now we have actually seen the CSR guys getting involved, and it's shifted beyond whether this is part of CSR or not, this expense counts or not, how do I report it, to how do I make the money work more effectively on the ground, and how do I create more impact on the ground. So I think that's a big change that we are seeing. The second thing that we have observed at Nexen is a use of measurements and outcomes. I think, as I said earlier, it was more about checkbook charity. You felt good about it. But now you want to know what good you have done on the ground. You want to be able to measure it, touch it, feel it, understand the impact, and say that if I'm spending this rupee, can it go somewhere else where it has more impact tomorrow? So I think that measurements and outcomes, the focus is now much, much more. So that's another second big trend that we are seeing. The third trend that we are seeing is a big use of technology. I think CSR is probably the only department in the company which doesn't use technology or never use technology. HR had their own system, finance had their own system, operations had their own system, but CSR was still on pen and paper and Excel sheets. I think now we are seeing people getting more evolved, the board saying, okay, I need reports, dashboards, I need analytics, I need all sorts of stuff. So I think another trend that we are seeing is use of technology. And the last one, what I would like to mention here is partnerships and collaborations. I think earlier the approach was my toilet has to have my logo, and there wasn't too much partnerships. But now we are seeing a lot of collaborations happening, and especially with the government, and that is very critical because the CSR money, it seems like a huge amount, but it's very, very small compared to what government spends. Right. So in an ideal situation, if all companies spend 2%, it would be 20,000 crores. That's across 11 different areas, right, from health, education, skills, sanitation, women awareness, all set together. Whereas the government spends 80,000 crores just on primary education. So if companies have to make a meaningful difference to India, I think they need to focus on areas where the government can't do well. And those are areas like technology, project management, building pilots which the government can then look at and scale it up. Right. So I think instead of replicating what the government is doing, companies are now looking at partnering with them. And even on the government side, I think a lot of the ministries are proactively reaching out to corporates, not with the intention to get money, but to partner with them to create actually good projects on the ground, leveraging the skill sets on both sides. Right. So for example, Ministry of Skills is working a lot with the government. Ministry of Women and Child Development is working with a lot with the corporates. So I think this partnership would actually create meaningful impact, and that's when you would actually see the benefit of the law for the country and citizens.
Absolutely. So the good news is we can see that work has started. It is definitely work in progress, but yes, it has started. As to what you were talking about, the figures, I have few numbers here of top spenders. We have Reliance Industries, ONGC, Infosys, TCS, ITC, NTPC, NMDC, Tata Steel, Oil India and Wipro. If you could share with us, if not exact numbers, some spend and in the year 2015-16, and what's the allocated budget for 16-17?
See, if I look at 15-16, first I look at law. The law says that it has to be 2% of net profit, which translated in simple words is roughly around 2% of your profit before tax.
Right.
Yeah.
So from our perspective, when we looked at 15-16 and we just closed 15-16, our spend would be slightly above 2%, so which means that we are going beyond. So spend is in the range of between 60 and 65 odd crore rupees. So that's what we are spending. Prior to that, yes, we spent less, but in 15-16, we really gave a lot of focus. And if I look at 16-17, the numbers have yet to come in because the results of 15-16 haven't come in, but it will be more than that.
More than that, right. Ms. Sinha, you being a part of the board, if you could share with us few numbers.
Right. So I'm not sure if I'd like to share numbers, but I can tell you that our spend, when we started, as I've already mentioned, it wasn't mandatory for us to spend. And year on year, our CSR budget has been growing in multiples.
Right.
Right, so as we speak this year, our budget is 5 times of last year's, and last year's was almost double of the year before. And so that's the story. We're, as I said, very young, and for us, the 2%, we are, I think, you have different sorts of groups of companies and clusters of companies. We are one of the companies where we've not really, I think we've always been well above what we are required to spend, and when we were not required to spend, we were still spending it. We really, we are in a clean business, right? We are in the renewable energy space. So, unlike a lot of companies who have to balance out the nature of the business with social responsibility, we really don't need to do that. Having said that, we really do need to do that, because, CSR is very strategic. You may think you're in the clean area of doing business, but the communities, when you're going to the grassroots of India and operating there, and you're generating power, people tend to feel you're taking away things from them, right? That's not a good feeling to have. So before we enter these areas, we invest a lot of our time and bandwidth of our site employees, some of our corporate employees, and the CSR team to connect with the community in different ways. So one of the things we do is we have cricket matches with the communities, which is called the RYLP, which is the, it's called RPL. So it's Renew Premier League.
All right.
Right? So where we get the people in the government, the communities, Renew's team, all get mixed and then separated in 2 teams, and we interact with each other. So the idea is for the board to be asking the right questions, to be bringing attention, to be integrating CSR with the day-to-day operations of a company, right? It's not only year-end report and Q&A. It is as you do business. We do business, first of all, in a responsible way. So a lot of practices are, very sustainable initiatives which we've introduced. We are a LEED certified company, which is something we do. We like to cover all our bases. And then engagement is, again, as I said, integrated. The board, when you ask the right questions, you're getting people to make sure that when they do their business, they think about it and they address those issues. So to that extent, I think, we've been year on year multiplying our commitment to the CSR spend, and that's just the way, that's the business as usual as far as Renew is concerned.
All right. Thank you. Mr. Humbad, if you could share with us a few numbers, if you could give us a general view.
Sure. So, one thing is that the list of companies you mentioned, as in purely based on the fact that they make the highest profits, the 2% of their profits would always be higher and they would spend more. And happens globally. As in the richest man in the world, Bill Gates, spends the most through its foundation. As in it's not.
But then yes, let's understand that is a choice as well, right?
Sure.
We had $60 billion being invested in Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation just recently, and in addition to that, we had another $40 billion by Mr. Warren Buffett. So it's like the bigger the number, you get more contribution.
True.
But then, yes, it is also a matter of choice. They wanted to do it, so.
That's,
It's not mandatory as of 2% is not mandatory.
It's not mandatory.
Yeah, so
and
that's why it's choice.
And I think it's also important to understand that, we always look at quality over quantity. So the quantum of funds is important, but how they're put to use, how effectively they're put to use, I think is very important. And from that point of view, it's important to see that there are some mechanisms, I think at least in India, sharper mechanisms in terms of an audit on the kind of work which is being done, so that there is more responsibility, more assessment, and which I think would validate some of these programs and make them more real. I think that's quite important. So 2% was a great step, a very important one. A unique one, and as India is taking its leadership role in the world, I would say without doubt that India has taken a leadership role in this area. I think we have to be very careful as to how we walk the path now, right? There are lots of issues which need to be ironed out, lots of creases. So that's, I think, very important.
Yeah, I think the
Okay, just coming
effectiveness
back
of capital is probably more important, as she was mentioning, than the quantum of capital deployed.
Right.
And I think the first thing, the general saying is, if you have to manage well, you need to first measure. So, the first thing is on measurement.
Measure, yes.
And I think that's something which companies are looking at right now. As in, we are still to evolve as a country on measurements. As in, globally, if you look at CSR, there is a big focus on outcomes and impact. And I think in India, we think more from the heart, but I think we need to think from the mind as well, and understand what's the exact impact on the ground. And first is to start measuring. And if you start looking at that part, then as I mentioned, through our technology platform, companies spend about 1,000 crores annually, and that is about 15% of the entire country's spend. So the country spends about 6,000 crores a year. And if you look at 14-15, the most of the spend was in the richer states. So if you look at the state GDP and the growth rate, and if you look at the CSR funds, it's actually the money is going to the richer states rather than the poorer states. So is it, being the most effective? We don't know. So I think once you start measuring, you would actually start realizing the efficiency of capital. And more than the quantum, I think it's the efficiency which is more important. Also, I think we think of CSR in very, very conventional ways. As in again 14-15, a lot of money went to, let's say, infrastructure building projects. But there are a lot of things which you can do. For example, invest in technology incubation centers and promote startups, which Prime Minister himself is promoting in a big way. And I think if you invest probably 1 rupee in a startup, that may lead to more return on the ground in terms of scale and impact and more leverage of capital. So I think that is more critical, because you have a limited sum of money. There is a big problem to solve. How do you put it in the right areas so that you can capture or solve most of the problem? Probably not all, for sure. And I think globally there is a lot of interest in this law. As in, we, for example, raised our round of funding from Silicon Valley. And the VCs there are very excited, saying that India is the first country, and if you do well in India, there are a lot of other countries now wanting to do something like this, and you could probably do well there. So I think the law has made us leader in this space, where the developed world is following us rather than the other way around, which has been the norm till date.
Right.
Correct.
I wanted to just add another point. I think in terms of abundance of capital in this sector, in this segment, social responsibility, I don't think there is any dearth. Whether it is the government, I think the funds are tremendous. How we implement, how we execute, how we report, that is important. I think it's very important, as our finance minister had mentioned when Economic Times had launched the compendium, that it's important for the government sometimes to stay out of the private sector in certain areas. And I think the private sector will do a great job on its own if there are synergies between what they are doing and social responsibility. I think there will be, that's the way companies do business.
Right.
They like to have a return on their investment, and they would do the same as far as CSR is concerned. So while the general vision and the direction and the space is there on what the government is doing, there has to be a collaboration. But I think each company should be left alone to decide what, how, when they should be doing what.
And where to spend.
And where to spend.
And I think the key thing is, from a private sector, apart from whatever government does on the funds, it's the skills related to monitoring and project management, which ensure that 1 rupee spent by private sector or corporate sector on CSR perhaps could get much more mileage than whatever is being spent by government in that money. So that's the advantage that we get from corporate sector. So it's not just this 20,000 crores or 6,000 crores which is being spent by corporate sector, but the efficacy of that spend and the multiplier impact, because there are a lot of times when we are not just spending the money, but all our employees, their families and the extended families, everybody is involved. So there's a lot of energy, efforts, manpower which is also getting into all of these projects as part of, we call it CSR, ISR, whatever. But the fact is that it's not just the money part, but also the human capital which is getting into CSR from a company's perspective.
Right. So what do you think would be the way forward, 2016-17, and the contribution, which would be more of the private or of public?
So public would always be higher. Government will always spend much more than what corporate sector is spending, because if it last year, if ideally, as he also said, Abhishek also said that ideally it would have been 20,000 crores if everyone spent 2%. This year it might be 22,000 crores.
Right.
But the government spend runs into hundreds of thousands of crores, so government would always be higher. But I personally think that if you really look at 14-15, then 15-16 and 16-17, the quantum of money being spent by corporate sector is also increasing exponentially, number one. Number two, what I have also seen is that lot of companies which may not be falling under this mandate of the three categories that you spoke right in the beginning, irrespective of that, people are now coming forward and willing to do that.
Yes, even they are doing
And
it, right.
the concept of writing the check, the checkbook charity word that he rightly used, is actually getting away, and people want to contribute and see the results on the ground rather than just giving a check to some charity.
Right, right. Ms. Sinha?
Yeah, so again, in terms of spends, I agree, there's a huge difference between what the government does, what the private sector does. I think both can do it more effectively, there's no question. There should be more accountability, no question. I think I'd like to bring attention to some of the trends which we believe, we could be seeing. Given the amount of funds which are now available in the sector, one thing which I'm really excited about is the ability of this sector to attract young social entrepreneurs. I think more and more people are going to be coming into this field to be able to help the government and the private sector to implement, execute, and to be able to assess projects. So there are more opportunities, entrepreneurial opportunities, which is the future, right? More scope for innovation, I think, definitely in terms of not only reporting, but in terms of implementation of the program. So using technology, for example, is another area which you referred to right now, that, technology can be used to solve a number of problems. So whether it is health related, whether it is education, like I talked about, our program is going to be based on technology.
Absolutely.
Right?
And I guess that is what we are observing right now. Any business which has been able to solve a problem that has really become the boss, the conqueror of the entire sector. So we have seen that in all e-retail or other businesses. The minute you solve the problem, you are there in business.
That's true. So using technology is important, and to be able to reach out to people and reach out to places where you would have not been able to reach out to. Using technology, leveraging technology to not only report, but to be able to reach to that last person you wouldn't have been able to reach out, and the innovative ways in which you can reach out to a mass of people. A billion people is less as far as technology is concerned.
Right.
So that is really exciting. And I think the impact and the diversity, again, I guess as a woman member, I have to bring it up. The fact that women are now required to be on boards, I think is an extremely important step. I just feel that we've settled for many years for suboptimal talent on boards and ignored women. So I think this is really a great time, and it really adds a lot.
Let's hope that would be a mandate soon.
See,
It is
it's a mandate.
It is,
well,
without, but a greater extent.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you. The more the merrier. I mean, there is absolutely no need for any limit. So I think these are some of the initiatives and trends. Other than the quantum of spending, I'm really excited about.
So one side impact that I'm seeing of this law over last 2 years is the students in the engineering colleges, MBA institutes, many of them today want to do an internship under CSR. So be it with NGOs, there are a lot of people who want to actually go to NGOs. So this entire law is also kind of bringing a lot of awareness even at the colleges that CSR is important or ISR is important. So this is actually bringing a cultural change in the country.
Yeah, I just wanted to substantiate both these things with data points. So actually, if you look at 14-15, companies which had women CEOs, spent more than companies which had men CEOs as a percentage of, the capital.
Women anyways like to spend a lot. So
I disagree with that. No, that's a stereotypical.
He's talking about CSR.
That's
CSR.
good news.
CSR is great. If they're spending on women's causes, connecting with women is great. But
So that's one. And second is, in fact, in our team, as in half our team is from IITs, IIMs, and BITs. And as we have been hearing, and it's become a cool sector to work in. I think that's
correct.
there.
That's correct.
And also the salaries have gone up. I think
Absolutely.
that's
I was just coming to that.
and people think that it's not that it's a compromise sector anymore. It's actually an ambitious driven sector, and you can grow and you can contribute not just professionally, personally, but also to the society. So it's like a win-win kind of a sector for anyone.
Very fulfilling.
Very
Yeah,
fulfilling
yeah.
and giving back. And actually, if I could just add on to that, if you even look at international universities, there's a very interesting article on how the Ivy Leagues are recruiting students into their programs. It's not as much about the quantum again.
Sure,
It's not about
sure.
your SAT scores or
Yeah.
your GPA. It's important, but it's about the service you've been engaged in. And when I've been interviewing on campuses, the IIMs, etc., students always tell me that it's about why do they want to come and work in a clean energy company, because they feel like they're giving back, right? And that is something which is becoming a cool thing to do, to be associated with ventures where you're seen to be giving back. And CSR clearly is a very, very good way to do that.
Way to do that.
Yeah,
right.
one more interesting trend that we are seeing is, the entire focus of the law was on corporates, which was, generating capital. But there is another whole bunch, which is the NGOs, which is consuming capital.
Right.
And in India there are 3 million NGOs, and there are more NGOs than the number of policemen in the country.
Is that right?
Yeah. So that's the number of NGOs. But you need to build the supply side so that they can consume that capital and deploy it effectively.
Yes.
I think that is something, for the NGOs, there was this one time wherein the law came and, the quantum of money shot up exponentially. And especially for on-ground social projects, you can't just absorb money and, deliver like a factory and, build it much bigger. So you need a lot of things to work for you. So I think, building the NGO side capacity to absorb funds and deploy effectively, I think that's a very important thing that, we are seeing and we have to actually get through. And I think companies also have a big role to play to enable NGOs to be more professional, to, deploy capital more effectively, hire the best talent, and I think sooner, as we are seeing good talent coming to companies, we are also seeing good talent coming to NGOs, and this is a great opportunity for them also to make it big. I think so. That's another very
the project management skills and the technology skills even in NGOs is increasing a lot these days.
Yeah.
I guess all this is
just one point on that.
Sure.
See, earlier on, if you look at the trends, earlier, you went and did, maybe a program in social work and started an NGO. That is shifting, and therefore you saw a lot of the NGOs which evolved and developed, they lacked the management capabilities.
Management skills or not.
Financial management and strategic capabilities. They had the passion, which is very important. They had knowledge of what they were doing and expertise and skills, but that strategic management and financial capabilities were lacking. Now you have young people such as yourselves who are from business schools, who are also looking at this sector, and hence you're bringing with you skills which are very critical to be successful, and hence I see the NGOs being replaced by social entrepreneurship, and which is a great thing to happen in the sector.
Sure.
I guess in a way everything is falling in its place, because now we have the stipulated regular amount being backed by companies in the form of CSR, and it's going to NGOs, so we see youngsters having a regular paycheck, so it's good time for them. All right. Moving on the same lines, I wanted to talk something on sector wise, because we see some sectors have been really preferred sectors for CSR. One being education, where we have vocational and special education, eradicating hunger, power and healthcare, environmental sustainability, no doubt, and rural development. Now, however, here in India at present, the trend is we have seen education really being on top, and also women empowerment.
Correct.
So your thoughts on that?
Yes, that's true. So when I spoke about the 4 key areas, in fact 2 of them are here, and the other thing was road safety, which I spoke about, so which is adjacent to our business, but India is also one of those countries which has highest fatalities in the world. So we are roughly around 1.4 lakh people dying on the roads.
Right.
So that's why we wanted to focus on road safety also. But education, yes, the reality is somewhere all of us genuinely believe that if we educate masses, it automatically empowers the entire country. And especially from our perspective, even within education, we want to focus on girl child, because the key thought over there is that if we empower our girl child who become women of tomorrow, I think the entire society gets empowered much faster. So that's the reason why we are also focusing on education and girl child.
All right.
And the reality is that India has a lot of pollution, so the fourth thing of getting into Swachh Bharat or planting trees is more for the society in general.
All right. Ms. Sinha?
So yeah, I do agree that there is a sense of partiality in terms of why corporates tend to spend more in certain areas. Maybe it is partially because there is a need to spend. We believe that if we spend in certain areas, we're going to be able to have a greater impact. So there is a clear logic to that, but I do understand that sectors which don't have attention should get attention. So we are looking at sports as an area where we'd like to spend more. And so we have a program where we identify very talented sports people, both women and men. And once they reach a certain stage where they feel like they're running out of funding, we step in and we support them to be able to travel for tournaments, to be able to get, cutting edge training. So across sports, and also to promote sports which are dying. So we've just, last year we conceptualized this, and now we are in a process of implementing it step by step. I believe it's really important for India to rise up as far as its visibility in sports other than cricket is concerned.
Right.
So we are working hard on that. Yeah.
Great. Mr. Humbad, if you could give us a few figures again, you being the number expert on this topic.
So I think the areas that you mentioned are then education, primary beneficiary health, again second number, and then rural development and women empowerment. I think these are the top 4 areas. But if you look at, let's say, startup incubation centers, sports, art and culture, armed forces veterans, a very, very minuscule amount. Less than 2% of the entire spend went to these 4 areas.
Right.
And I think it's also because it was the first year of the law. Companies wanted to be risk-free. The first objective was risk mitigation. So invest in ongoing programs of large NGOs, which have the minimal risk of going to a political party or a religious association or something of that sort, or not working out well. I think now we are seeing companies making their own programs rather than investing in ready-made programs. They actually want to develop their own programs, and they are looking at what we call a portfolio approach. So there is one flagship project which companies invest the maximum amount, let's say 50% of their funds on, which they can talk about, which creates maximum impact and stuff. Then there is some portion which is beneficial from an employee engagement perspective. I think because employees are a critical stakeholder here. So how can employees start contributing or start getting involved in a particular project? Another area which companies look at is to go with the theme of the country. As in, Swachh Bharat was the theme probably last year. Skill India is the theme this year. So, some amount of money given to a theme of the company. Then there are MNCs which have headquarters globally. So some amount of money goes to what the headquarters think is the right thing to do. So I think it's like a financial manager of you're managing your stocks and have a portfolio. Similarly, you have a CSR fund, and you need to manage your portfolio to get returns for all stakeholders. I think that's the approach, and I think companies will now identify niches where with little money they can create most impact and also more visibility, because that's also very critical for the company and also the sector. So I think you will see over the years the CSR funds going to projects which are sharper, focused, probably in a geography or a particular beneficiary, but with more and more impact. So I think these trends would definitely change over time.
What are the challenges that the sector is facing? I mean, this particular project CSR is facing in India.
I think in terms of challenges, there are many. It starts right with the board. Board being involved is a good thing, and also a bad thing from a CSR manager perspective. CSR is an area where everyone has an opinion. It's like cricket and Bollywood. Everyone knows what's the right thing to do. So every board member thinks that I know what's the best place to put in my money. So how do you navigate the board so that you come to the right conclusion? It starts with that. Then coming to finding the right NGOs. I think there are so many NGOs, but if you ask anyone which are the good NGOs, you can count on their fingertips. So compared to 3 million versus 10, it's a the NGO world is large, but the good NGO world is very small. So finding the right NGO. The third thing I think is monitoring, evaluation, impact assessment reporting. CSR is the only area or the only outlet for the company where the money is outside the company. You know, the projects are outside, the funds are outside, the stakeholders are outside. So it's, you know, very difficult for you to measure or monitor where it is. Anything inside your plant, inside your factory is easy, you can see it. But imagine a project in remote part of a country, let's say you're building toilets.
Right.
You don't know what's happening, whether the toilet is built or not. And one option is to go there, but the cost of going there is probably more than the cost of the toilet. So you need to have a cost-effective way, but a very objective and transparent way of measurement. I think that's important. And I think one of the biggest things, the challenges is in terms of reporting. I think in a lot of the large companies also the reporting quality wasn't that great. And in CSR there is no government audit, and repeated government committees have said that we won't do an audit. So the only way in which the money will be used effectively if, you know, public audits or, you know, the broader stakeholders would audit, and they can audit only if the reporting is good. So I think we need to evolve a lot in terms of quality reporting of our projects. There is an MCA compliance report, but I think from a good governance practice, companies, at least the better ones and the bigger ones, need to report, you know, much better.
All right, Ms. Sinha?
Yeah, so I think you raised all very good points. Starting with the board, I think the issues are that while the role of the board is very powerful, it can also be, you know, a little bit disruptive if not influenced properly. So sometimes there is a lot of pressure to invest in certain programs or to commit to certain programs. I think it's very important for boards to take a step back and ensure that what they're committing to is aligned with the strategic business objective. Because it sends the right signals to your employees, to people who are implementing it, even to the communities, you see. So that I think is important. The role of the board is very critical, and they have to take it seriously and ensure that they gatekeep it from any soft issues which can distort the larger purpose. Right, so that is one, and I think the other issues, so you know, some of the issues we need to think about is the weaker areas which we talked about.
Right.
You know, how do we include those in the broader scheme of things? You know, they're getting left out. The same would apply for certain parts of the country which are actually very needy in terms of social investments. Say the Northeast, for example, very challenging from a physical point of view in terms of the location. You know, it's difficult to reach people. That's where I think people should, to a certain companies, to a certain extent, while keeping the larger business objective in mind, should look at a larger purpose for the country as well. Because, you know, if the country, there is a progress for, you know, if everybody is benefiting,
Absolutely.
then the country benefits, and hence. So not a large, a measured portion should be looked at some of these issues. And last but not the least, NGOs. So I think just like in companies, you know, for a bank to give debt to a company, you need a rating. It'll be very helpful for companies like us if we can look at a database where we can rate NGOs and get a sense of, you know, a scientific way in which we can rate NGOs for either different sectors or overall management quality, execution quality, so that, you know, we know what to expect, and we can raise the bar of what we expect out of these NGOs.
Right.
So I think that will make the whole CSR space far more effective and efficient and productive. So I think that is really important, because right now, personally, sometimes you're right, we're fortunate that we have presence at the sites. So we have our site team involved and engaged in monitoring and feedback. Not everybody has the luxury and benefit of doing that. So I spend a lot of my time. So any time, even before coming for this, there was an approval. But there are various stakeholders within the organization who have to approve a project for satisfaction before I approve it.
All right.
And you know, if I had an NGO which met those, you know, kind of met those criteria, I would probably be more comfortable. So, and I don't know whether they're doing one project for 5 different corporates or they're only doing it for us. And I'd like my spend to go to areas I want to spend. And the community also to be able to understand that. it's important for us from a strategic point of view. So I
Right.
think that how we can scientifically make and categorize NGOs and their performance, I think is important, and I think we should make auditing also should be mandatory to make the work more measurable.
Measurable.
So
Mr.
I'll
Sethi?
just add a couple of things without repeating what are the
Right.
great points that they've said. I think there's also somewhere in our society in general, there are a lot of people who feel that since companies are doing CSR, so anything and everything could come under CSR. So which would mean that they want to do a sponsorship of anything. So there's enough and more pressure coming from community to do projects which are actually not in line with your whatever you want to do.
Right.
But since you are in that community, so it becomes a lot of times very difficult to even tell people that this is not CSR.
Absolutely.
So that I think puts...
In law, in black and white, it states sponsorship is not CSR.
Yeah, for example, sponsorship was one, but even otherwise there's some activity that someone wants to do in a particular community or in my village because I belong to that village.
Right.
So please do something for me. So I think that's a lot of pressure that comes from people onto the...
So that's one obstacle that you're facing.
That's one obstacle. The second is, it's not just from within the community, but the number of, at least I can tell you that the number of letters that one gets from all over. So 3 million NGOs, but out of that maybe you get 100,000 odd letters.
Okay.
So which says that, please do this for me, please do this for me. See, even to analyze all that and see whether any one of them is genuine, more than one is genuine,
Right,
I think it takes a lot of time and energy. And if one can really have some measured criteria for even looking at the genuineness of a cause or an NGO, because you don't want to get into a situation where you spend money with good faith and suddenly you know that the guy with whom you spent is a fake guy. So that becomes a challenge.
All right. In one of the latest report by KPMG and SHM, it states corporate social responsibility is not charity and is a responsibility.
Absolutely.
What would you like to say about that?
Yeah. I think the way this law has helped corporate India is CSR has moved from philanthropy or a check cutting into actually doing on the ground. And when you do some activity on the ground and when you are writing in your annual report that I have done this, you are responsible for every word that you write over there.
Right.
You put in a monitoring mechanism, you ensure that the beneficiaries actually get the benefits, and that's where it has moved from philanthropy to responsibility. And it's not just corporate responsibility, but tomorrow your own employees' responsibility, which gets into individual social responsibility also. So responsibility, to my mind, is the biggest word in this entire thing.
Ms. Sinha, your thoughts?
Yeah, no, I mean, there's no question of disagreeing. I think the language of CSR has changed from philanthropy to responsibility, and I think it's a good thing. It just shows that the field is evolving and evolving for the better in the right direction. And it's important for all of us to do whatever we are doing in a very considered, in a very responsible way, so that we can have deep-rooted impact and transform the societies, the communities and the country to create a better India. I mean, there is no question about that.
Right.
And I would just add that, from charity to responsibility, and I think it's from responsibility to opportunity. So I think
Absolutely.
it's now about how do you make the most of it for the company, for the society, for the country. I think there is a long way ahead, but huge opportunity. And if you look at there's a lot of talk on e-commerce, for example, and the billions of dollars which flowed in that sector and changed the entire landscape. Similarly, this law has put in so much capital in this sector and would definitely change the landscape and help everyone. So that's the hope and the vision.
Right.
True.
Do you think there should be a regulatory body like we have our credit score, CIBIL, and it's really working out well? Do you think a regulatory body would help?
I said that. I think it's very
For the
important
NGOs.
for us to have a regulatory body
Not
predominantly.
just for the NGOs,
but even
Mr.
to
Sethi,
monitor
but
the
Yes, even
CSR.
to monitor the CSR.
It shouldn't become too bureaucratic beyond
Yeah.
a point.
Right.
That's so
Because
I'm
then
not
it
too sure.
becomes
Yeah.
restrictive, and then it sort of curbs innovation. But to the extent we can include measures to focus on the responsibility
Correct.
aspect of the scheme of things, we should definitely do that. You talked about the e-commerce. It's a bit of a pity that entrepreneurs like us get shaded compared to the e-commerce, because when you look at a lot of entrepreneurs which are there in this country, and the kind of work they're doing is pretty significant, and campaigns can be a very powerful messaging tool to have that impact, to educate people on various issues. Right now, such campaigns are carved out of CSR. I believe if done properly, it is a very powerful way of making a difference, having an impact, right? And if in some way these can be included with a very defined, very clearly defined do's and don'ts, I think educating and making people aware, right, of issues, whether it is, on cleanliness, whether it is on education, if companies who are related to those, sectors are able to use campaign to educate and create awareness, I think it will have a lot of impact on transforming the society. So I don't know, I think that is something I would hope,
Right.
with a lot of don'ts, but do's should happen eventually there.
All right. Sethi?
Yes, that's what I said, that beyond a point, regulators should not really kind of throttle innovation.
All right. Your closing remarks.
No, I think just on the regulatory part, from an NGO perspective, it is important because one is there are so many NGOs, and second is it's very difficult for an NGO to differentiate itself from another if there is no one judging them. So every NGO would say I do the best work, but there are two of them, and you want to compare them. It becomes very difficult. And putting myself in an NGO shoes,
Right.
I would want someone to rate me because I have done good work, and I can then present it to a potential donor. So I think from a NGO perspective, the regulatory body becomes very important. And on a lighter note, as in from a corporate perspective, whenever we go and meet companies and they ask us that if you do the wrong things, what happens? So we just say that
Wrong things, as in?
as in on the CSR part and
All
invest
right.
in projects which probably are not CSR, don't have the impact. And we always say that your report would go in the hands of Arnab Goswami. And that's like the that's the public audit power if companies can report well. So I think from an NGO perspective, it's very critical for them to differentiate themselves and say why they are better than the other.
I think the earlier point on reporting you said earlier also, my view is that since it's just a 2-year-old or reporting was done only once, as companies also start reporting on a regular basis, the quality of reporting actually would increase. So this year quality of report should be much better than last year.
Because I think they were trying to understand,
Correct.
spending a lot of time trying to understand what needs to be done.
Right.
My closing comments are the following: that I believe the government has shown great innovation by introducing 2%. So kind of 3 cheers for them for doing that. I think it's time for the private sector now to innovate, and for the government to let them be and to go and do what they have to do and make a difference. I also believe that 2% there or not, companies who want to be socially responsible will be responsible.
Right.
And those who don't have the intention of being responsible, 2% or not, will figure out a way not to be responsible. So, I think it's important to understand that there are a bunch of companies out there who are there to make a difference, and more power to them to make a difference.
Absolutely. I think the closing remark would be that CSR law and whatever has happened in the country over the last 2 years is very good from a society perspective. And it's not just the corporates or the NGOs, but as I said earlier, it's actually changing the culture right at the student level.
Right.
So everybody wants to, because what I've seen even with professionals is that a lot of professionals do while they get the professional satisfaction in doing whatever they get, but with CSR you also get a lot of personal satisfaction.
Right.
So it is helping the society in general also, irrespective of spend. That's how I see.
Great.
Yeah, it's a win-win for everyone, as in country, company,
Society.
employee, society,
Everybody.
everyone.
I guess that's the bottom line. It's a win-win for all of us.
Absolutely, it is.
Great. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks.